This video, I want to cover some of the updates we've made to kind of the information we passed from ServiceNow to Google Analytics to give some deeper tracking of some of the activities that are being performed. And some of the reason why we need to make these updates is really the architecture of our portal application has a lot of pages where the content is dynamic based off of you clicking on categories or making different actions. So you're not changing URLs per se that would trigger a push to Google Analytics, but you're performing kind of single page application kind of actions. And I should note that these updates were added in version 4.3. So one of the first things that we're adding or updating as part of this, and let me highlight this from the Google Analytics side first, is we are pushing user ID information. So before it was pushing basically just a session ID of connection. Now we're tying it back to the ServiceNow login ID. And so this gives us some benefits of whether or not the connected user is considered a new user versus a visitor, right? Have we seen this user ID before, connecting and tracked through our portal connections, or is it considered something new that we haven't seen before? So that's one aspect we're doing there. The other attribute we're pushing up now that we weren't pushing up before is session language. So if the user has targeted a session language, we're pushing that up. And so as far as the other demographics, we were tracking location before. This will track it down to a city level, right? So we'll see down at granular city level where these users are coming from. In my case, from Centennial, Colorado. Now let me show you kind of where in the code we're doing this. So this is the header script of one of our themes. So the changes that were made here on the server side, there's a change to kind of pass in or set the language property of this user object based off whatever their current session language is. So we're going to use that to push up to Google Analytics. The other one I want to highlight is you'll see code here for data.refer. Now what this is if my URL here had a refer on it, so take for example evergreensys.com. What this would give me is that when I establish my session to ServiceNow, it's going to pass up this refer information up to Google Analytics. And what this can be useful for is if you have links on your intranet to the portal, you have other search utilities like a Google search appliance that is then going to take users from that Google search appliance to the ServiceNow portal. This can give you some additional information to say where did this come from. So this is kind of dependent on those initial sources passing when it comes to the ServiceNow portal passing this refer parameter to say the users came from this particular source. And so the benefit is you can then see how many people came directly to the portal versus how many came maybe from an intranet site into the portal as another piece of information to track. Now I'm just going to keep that blank. All right, so then kind of where we are making use of this information is in our, so that's the server-side script. On the client-side script, we have our object here, EVGGA, that we initialize with our tracking code. And I should mention, I meant to mention this first, where we put our tracking code is on our portal settings. There is an area under Other, and you'll see Google's Analytics tracking code. And just a thing to know with this, with Google Analytics, you can create multiple different tracking codes for different URLs. So if you want to put a different one for production versus development, that's a capability. And so this whole thing hinges off of setting this property. This is really what drives how we pass information to Google Analytics. So back here, so we're passing our tracking code, we're passing our user object and a refer. And basically what that's doing is in our object here in our initialization, it's checking whether or not user name is specified, language is specified, refer is specified, making those different settings. Okay. So that's kind of the demographic change that we made. The other big change we made, so let's go to kind of get help as an example. As I mentioned, a lot of our pages are structured to where as I click through them, it's not changing the URL above, but I'm actually kind of clicking through different decision branches here, right? I am clicking through and making a decision that I want to click through this different setting here and getting ultimately a form. And further, I can go and click on different knowledge articles to see details about those. Now, what we wanted to do with this process, right? So take, for example, this scenario of user access issues, get help, get my form, click on what's is spam, right? Initiate a chat. These are all these different actions to drive self-help. If I go over to Google Analytics and I look at kind of real-time content, some of the things that are happening right now for us and me and these active users is it's tracking down to the level of all of what I've clicked on. That I've clicked on these different decision branches, right, of get help related, email access, email related. It's also tracking events now, so different events I perform, like I initiated a chat activity related to this. Further, if I come out here and I actually submit a ticket, I hit a submission of a ticket, what we're going to find in this situation is that if I look at my events here, we're also going to have another event's going to pop in here related to actually submitting a ticket in context to a get help kind of activity or session, right? So we're tracking details of what all is happening as part of that get help kind of activity, right? So also, if I go to the shopping area, another kind of case where we're trying to track details of these things. And so as I drill through catalogs, right, I'm clicking through these categories, trying to find what I'm looking for. Click on business continuity. I can add this to my cart. Right, I go and clear my elements here. I click on cup of coffee. All these different items in here is my options. Let me go click on tablet request as an example. And let's go add this to my cart. All of this activity that I'm doing is also going to happen in terms of events, as well as, so the events are going to track some of the clicks that I make, like adding something to my cart, removing something from my cart. The actual page locations are going to be under my content, right? So I'm going to see changes to not just the page, but also as I click through the different categories. It's going to capture and track those different kind of category changes as kind of page views as well. And so further, so just to highlight or kind of talk through the full details of it, all of the cart activities, so add an item to my cart, remove an item to my cart. If I go, see a page change is going to be recorded. If I go and add this item to my save for later cart, it's going to show that as a tracked event. If I then add this back to my active cart, it's going to show that as a kind of a changed cart event. So that's basically the gist of kind of what we're doing here, is that we're tracking a lot more granularity of, as you're going through the individual pages, tracking those category selections, filters that are applied, as well as when you perform different actions of initiating a chat or adding items to cart, submitting items, placing orders. All that's going to be kind of captured and pushed up to Google Analytics. The other update I should mention as well is kind of under behavior, you will see site search information. Right, so the searches that are performed, what's happening now is we also are, as part of that connection to Google Analytics, we are taking the search terms that people are applying or to the search strings. We're kind of passing to Google Analytics in a special way that they get kind of recorded as separate search terms. So we have separate tracking of what are the most prominent searches that are being performed, and how commonly certain search terms are being actually used throughout the portal. So that's those are my updates in terms of Google Analytics and some of the depth of information we're passing to it. I hope this is helpful. Thanks.